The 121 docket investigation has rocked South Africa for months. Though some dismiss it as noise, few grasp that these nearly erased cases rescued by General Mkhwanazi are all critical, with some carrying far heavier weight than others. That's why this video uncovers the top 10 major dockets they tried to erase from South Africa's crime archives, broken down and explained for global viewers to grasp the legal context and the weight of the crimes. Now, for the evidence, our expose narrator guides you through verified Zondo Commission dockets and documents sourced by our journalists on the ground.
This is heartbreaking. You have to wonder if ANC officials still have a conscience. What's happening in South Africa is unacceptable, and we stand with citizens demanding accountability. The UNODC and ICC must step in and examine the state capture records. Next, we expose 10 major crime dockets.
Thursday, they tried to erase from South Africa's archives files General Mkhwanazi, if you knew, is to let die. If you're new, like and subscribe. Your vigilance keeps the truth alive.
10. The Babita Deokaran procurement file. The Babita Deokaran procurement file was the internal audit that traced emergency tender spending in Gauteng's health department, and then itself disappeared. It existed as a bound ledger and a mirrored folder on the document management system, cataloging supplier additions, duplicate invoices, and price escalations. Deokaran had paused. The last confirmed touchpoint is precise. 2:37 a.m., 14 August 2021, when a senior director's credentials opened the directory from an off-site IP geolocated to Santon, not the secure intranet. Minutes later, the logs record paired deletion commands, recycle bin disablement, and a remote sign-out. That morning's backup completed, but the checksums no longer matched, an early warning that the image had been rewritten. Forensic staff initiated chain of custody verification. Mounted archives showed the same gap. A week after Deokaran's fatal attack, a clerk found a paper copy stamped Confidential Procurement Oversight Committee. Corners charred, pages warped by heat. Audit log analytics later flagged a contractor account for migration testing that accessed adjacent tender folders tied to a firm retained by a logistics intermediary named in the same invoices. For global viewers, imagine a state health audit vanishing just as its key witness is targeted. The stakes are similar, even if motives remain unproven. Risk teams built for data loss prevention could not rebuild beyond totals, and forensic tools recovered spreadsheets stripped of recipient columns. In disciplinary proceedings, counsel argued that absence is not evidence, yet absence changed outcomes. Restitution hearings stalled. Managers returned to their posts while investigators argued whether a missing file could even be cited. The consequence is blunt. When a ledger is erased, accountability converts into speculation. What survives is the chronology of vanishing, the open session, the twin deletes, the failing hashes, an outline where a testimony should be, and a question about whom the audit would have cornered. 9. The Eastern Cape Police Firearm Disposal Log. The Eastern Cape Police Firearm Disposal Log was meant to prove that confiscated weapons had been destroyed. Instead, it proved how evidence can evaporate. Catalogued as Docket Series EC 2014-2018 and reported transferred to National Archives in 2019, the file produced only signature sheets when Parliament requested it. Behind the scenes, a suppressed memo cited an alert from the Zwelitsha records node. Audit log analytics registered a mass delete event driven by a session tied to an officer on suspension and privately seconded to a security firm. Forensic staff pulled shadow volume fragments that showed serial lists once slated for destruction reappearing on customs manifests, leaving Port Elizabeth within months of the declared disposal. Verification stalled. Barcode ranges on destruction certificates no longer matched armory ledgers. Entire ranges resolved to unknown. Technicians running a records recovery workflow reconstructed partial CSVs, dates and calibers intact, but the decisive serial columns gone, exactly the slice needed for courtroom proof. For context abroad, imagine an ATF database losing every row that ties seized rifles to later shootings. Prosecutions would fold overnight. In the Eastern Cape, a murder indictment collapsed when the state could not prove a pistol had once been logged for destruction.
Investigators tried ballistics, but the same deletion pattern removed cross-reference IDs linking bullets to the original docket. ESI forensic tooling located an automated task named Cleanup_Legacy Armory, created 2 days before the deletes, signed by a temporary admin profile. An internal affairs officer wrote that the timeline suggests deliberate tampering, a phrase later softened to document handling anomalies. Families expecting closure watched cases go dark because the one column that convicts, the serial, had been excised. The lesson is not technical, but human. When the log of destruction is destroyed, the legal promise it represents dies with it, and every absent number becomes a weapon that will never testify. 8. The Durban Port Customs Bribery Ledger. The Durban Port Customs Bribery Ledger was the Treasury's key to a R1 billion import fraud and a case study in precise digital tampering. Filed as KZN 221-2016, the ledger listed undervalued luxury cars, electronics, and chemicals, pairing each consignment with tariff codes and the officials who approved them. When auditors reopened the case in 2020, the physical binder was missing and the cloud mirror was smaller by 2.4 megabytes, the size of one deleted PDF. System traces showed a contractor test account performing 4 downloads from adjacent folders, then being deactivated within the hour. Analysts using ESI forensic tooling rebuilt fragments. Payment timestamps intact, recipient columns gone. Checksum drift matched a single file excision. Attempts to validate custody found the off-site backup ran the same day, producing a clean image of a compromised set. Integrity by form, not by truth. 2 days earlier, email requests for temporary elevated access were approved by a substitute custodian while the registrar was on leave. Badge logs placed that manager in the records room after hours. CCTV showed an outage. Notes inside the spreadsheets referenced valuation guidance that mirrored discount patterns later seen in seized shipments. For context abroad, it is like a U.S. Customs corruption file, losing every suspect's name but keeping totals. Numbers remain persuasive while culpability dissolves. Revenue teams built for data loss prevention could present totals, not ties. Without recipient fields, restitution claims shrank, and licenses suspended during the probe were quietly restored. Investigators stitched identities from bank timings and gate passes, but audit log analytics had been pruned. The very session IDs that prove who touched what were missing. The ledger's erasure did more than stall a case. It re-legitimized the network under scrutiny, allowing the next shipment to pass as routine commerce. And in a country where ports decide whether public money leaks or holds, one missing PDF became a passport stamped "cleared." Impunity encoded as a file size. Before we unseal the next layer of erasures, where intelligence files, cabinet memos, and judicial exhibits were wiped in the same midnight window, like, comment, and subscribe. Every click resurrects what they buried. Every share restores a page they burned. Because up next is the file that shouldn't exist at all. A vanished intelligence index that once mapped an entire covert surveillance ring, and its disappearance rewrote who the law could ever accuse.
7. The Pretoria Intelligence Surveillance Index. The Pretoria Intelligence Surveillance Index was the master list that linked covert phone taps, dead drop sites, and funding approvals across multiple surveillance programs, and then its index number blinked out of existence. Archived in an air-gapped cabinet at a secured facility outside Salvakop, the binder served as the map to every annexure, warrants, device IDs, cash disbursements, and debrief logs. According to sworn statements, the last verified custody occurred during a Friday rotation when an acting registrar signed the log with a fountain pen kept for that ritual alone. The following Monday, the card catalog carried a penciled note, re-indexed, but the corresponding drawer contained a gap measured in finger widths where the index should sit. On the digital side, the facility's librarian terminal recorded a late-night session that queried the identical call sign. Audit log analytics later showed that the same session performed 3 view-only actions on neighboring files and then timed out during a power dip. The CCTV grid for the vault corridor flickered to black for exactly 12 minutes after midnight. A generator self-test had not been scheduled. Technicians who initiated chain of custody verification found the seal numbers on the transport case repeated an earlier series used months prior, as if the box itself had been borrowed from a forgotten day and returned with yesterday's label. A forensics team captured disk images of the librarian's terminal. One hash no longer matched the weekly baseline. Parliament's Intelligence Committee filed written questions about index continuity. Replies were classified. For a global reader, imagine a federal index that ties clandestine payments to surveillance targets, vanishing the weekend before oversight meets. No proof of deletion, just a missing compass. Without that compass, internal investigators couldn't reconcile who authorized which taps or whether the same covert grant financed both informant grooming and unlawful interception. People once listed as targets became shadows with lawyers. People once listed as handlers became officers with clean CVs. Families whose phones were allegedly swept received no formal apology. Employees who complained about misuse found their HR files thinned of prior warnings. The cost is measured in years, trials that never begin, careers that never answer, history with its wires cut. If the master index can disappear, what prevents the annexures from following it into the same silent corridor? 6. The KwaZulu-Natal Tenderboard Minutes Cache. The KwaZulu-Natal Tenderboard Minutes Cache was the chronological backbone of who argued, who recused, and who voted during high-value awards, and then it fractured into redactions and gaps. The cache, covering mid-2016 through late 2018, existed as bound minute books and as exported PDFs from a legacy document management system instance. Committee members signed attendance sheets by hand. The chair's concluding summaries were pasted into the minutes with a distinctive long dash he alone used. When a civil case sought disclosure, the archive produced PDFs whose metadata placed their creation date months after the meetings. The paper minutes showed impressions of paragraphs that no longer existed, ghost lines visible under raking light, implying a prior version that had been lifted and reprinted. Server operators acknowledged a migration from a deprecated drive array. During that week, login trails show a guest account created for audit prep, which proceeded to batch export minutes into a folder later marked obsolete. Analysts conducting records recovery workflow restored autosave fragments, revealing recusal notes beside 2 names later linked to supplier relatives. Elsewhere, a motion marked Defer Award had been replaced by Noted, a verb that neutralizes accountability. For context abroad, picture a county board's minutes edited months later to erase who said no when a politically connected vendor won. The absence corrodes more than one case. It eats trust in the entire procurement cadence. In real time, vendors learned that appeals fail when the record of dissent is itself disputed. Investigators tried to triangulate with calendar invites and badge logs, but those too showed inconsistencies, a member present in the room, absent on paper. When anti-corruption staff raised alarms, the reply cited formatting corrections. Meanwhile, cost overruns grew. The same firms won again, and a dissenting member resigned mid-term, citing health reasons. To citizens, the law sounds clerical. To law, it is structural. Without credible minutes, you cannot prove that a vote was contaminated or that a chair steered discussion. Minutes tell who whispered proceed. When the verbs change, history changes with them. And if a deferred award becomes noted, what else can be rewritten into compliance? 5. The Johannesburg Metro Blue Light Procurement Dossier. The Johannesburg Metro Blue Light Procurement Dossier was supposed to record every invoice, serial, and service interval for emergency light bars and siren kits fitted to municipal vehicles, and it became a test of whether paperwork can be engineered to fail. Cataloged across purchase orders, fitment certificates, and warranty cards, the dossier tracked a burst of acquisitions, executed at quarter end when budgets run tight. Mechanics remember pallets arriving without the usual packing slips. Finance clerks recall supplier emails with identical phrasing across different companies. The central ledger's last intact export bore a file name with an underscore out of place, small enough to miss until a search returned nothing. When auditors reopened the case 2 years later, the physical folders delivered to them were heavy with duplicates, but light on origin proofs. The checksum history for the shared drive showed a drift beginning on the night a temp admin reset passwords for 3 users who were on leave. Forensic reviewers ran ESI forensic tooling and found that the spreadsheet fields storing serial numbers had been formatted as text, then as numbers, exported, an oscillation that breaks joins to maintenance logs. An internal email asked whether final fitment photos were needed. The reply claimed a storage outage. In workshops, officers pointed to vehicles with mismatched light bars. Invoices listed models that never sat on those roofs. Finance flagged warranty claims denied by the manufacturer, whose database showed no such serials. The city attempted a clawback case, but without unbroken references, the suit risked collapse. Data loss prevention alerts that should have fired when the ledger shrank were disabled for performance.
For international viewers, think of a city fleet whose emergency systems purchases cannot be proven. The hazard is not money alone, it is sirens that fail at speed. Courts require chain links. The dossier offered riddles. In testimony, a manager said, "We kept everything." Yet the one column that binds parts to cars, serial to VIN, had been mass blanked in a midnight save. What is a blue light if its existence cannot be proven? An idea that bills hours, an object that cannot be traced, a warning that might not sound when a life depends on it. 4. The NPA Case Management Purge Window. The NPA Case Management Purge Window was the 28-minute span during which open matters briefly lost their digital histories, and with them the proof of what prosecutors had already done. On a spring afternoon, a scheduled cleanup task ran on the national case system to archive dormant matters. Minutes into the job, network chatter spiked. Users reported freezing, and an automated Optimize Indexes command launched outside its maintenance window. What followed, according to internal emails later cited in a disciplinary hearing, was a rolling visibility failure, task lists emptying, attachments returning nil, and older memos replaced by placeholders. A rollback restored much, but not all. Broken pointers left islands of orphan files adrift in the database. Teams convened to triage. Some matters reopened fine, others returned without their crucial annexures. In one high-profile economic crime matter, the memo logging a restraint order attempt showed as created, but the PDF itself was absent. A prosecutor swore under oath that it had been uploaded the week before. Attempts at chain of custody verification across backup tiers crashed against a reality administrators know too well. The second backup had been seeded from the first after the purge began. Outside counsel described the episode as document handling anomalies. Insiders called it our longest half hour. Technical review flagged a race condition between archive and index rebuild. A separate line item noted a temp account with privileges expanded for testing. Analysts later pulled audit log analytics to map who touched what during the window, but session records for 2 nodes were truncated. For global readers, imagine a Justice Department's to-do history bleaching mid-afternoon. Every "did we file" devolves into "we think so." The truth is that capacity issues coexist with intent. Negligence and exploitation shake hands in a dim corridor.
For victims awaiting seizure orders, those 28 minutes stretched into another year. For accused persons, it meant leverage. And for a country keeping score, it is a reminder that a purge can be a mistake or a method depending on who reaches the console first. Across these four gaps, an index that guides surveillance, minutes that decide tenders, a ledger that arms emergency response, and a purge that weakens prosecution, the pattern is not noise, but design. When the record fails, power wins. If you want this investigation to push past the same darkness that ate those files, like, comment, and subscribe right now. Every click is a small act of restoration, every share a backup they cannot overwrite. Next, we open the foreshadowed corridor, a vanished archive that once stitched 3 provinces into one network, and its absence explains why the final names still aren't in court. Some disappearances feel accidental until you realize the same hands wrote the backups, held the keys, and timed the outages. 3. The Free State Integrated Procurement Registry. The Free State Integrated Procurement Registry was the digital nucleus meant to unify every provincial tender, bid, and evaluation, but its disappearance collapsed years of audit trails. Built in 2017 under a donor-funded transparency initiative, it stored procurement data from 6 departments in a central SQL cluster. The registry went offline in May 2021 after an index corruption alert. When contractors attempted restoration, they discovered both mirror drives had been reformatted the same day. Forensic engineers running audit log analytics identified a remote session from a private IP associated with an outsourced developer who had since immigrated. The activity matched a data loss prevention bypass script used to mask deletions as system maintenance. Investigators invoked emergency image recovery, extracting half of the registry as hexadecimal sludge. Critical tables, award histories, and bid evaluation scores were the only ones truly unrecoverable. Parliamentary transcripts later revealed that several of those awards belonged to a consortium that won flood relief tenders still under investigation. For global readers, imagine a U.S. state procurement database wiped out the week its governor's allies faced subpoenas. The erasure paralyzed auditors and invalidated public spending metrics, feeding Treasury dashboards. Civil society analysts attempted reconstruction via printouts salvaged from departmental caches, but each sheet differed subtly in totals, as though someone edited the sums before printing. By year's end, oversight teams admitted the master data set no longer exists. The registry's last verified checksum stands as the province's epitaph, an empty line where governance once wrote its balance sheet. 2. The Western Cape Intelligence Brief, known as Operation Grey Tide. The Western Cape Intelligence Brief, known as Operation Grey Tide, chronicled narcotics route infiltration through harbor and airport zones until it was marked obsolete and vanished from the National Intelligence Drive. Created in 2018 for interagency coordination, it contained surveillance summaries, informant code names, and planned interdictions. When a parliamentary oversight committee demanded its release in 2022, the master directory returned access denied, file not found. Internal correspondence retrieved later showed a request for temporary removal for redaction authorized by an acting section head. 3 days after that approval, ESI forensics tooling detected mass renaming of files using an anonymization script that deleted metadata permanently. When technicians attempted chain of custody verification, they discovered checksum log truncated mid-line, the digital equivalent of a shredded signature page. Parallel to this, a copy surfaced on a personal flash drive recovered from a retired officer's desk drawer, but the copy was corrupted and missing 26 pages. Portions recovered described how compromised agents had leaked planned raids to port security staff. For international readers, imagine a DEA operation file erased the week its mole was uncovered. Without the brief, prosecutions against smugglers collapsed. By the time replacements were drafted, the routes had evolved. The disappearance insulated insiders and reset accountability clocks. Intelligence officers called it a controlled sanitation. History will remember it as evidence that erasure can be a policy disguised as protection. 1. the National Treasury Beneficial Ownership Map. The National Treasury Beneficial Ownership Map was the crown jewel of reform, an interactive dataset linking companies, directors, and cross-border payments, and the single file whose loss rewrote the future of financial oversight. Completed in late 2022, it aggregated CIPC, banking, and customs data to expose shell chains used in illicit procurement. When the database failed to open in April 2023, administrators blamed API credential rotation. Within hours, the backup server crashed. The third-party mirror displayed empty folders. Later audits found that both environments had executed a scheduled purge launched by identical tokens. Experts analyzing records recovery workflow discovered timestamps aligning with midnight scripts from an external consultancy that once maintained the project. The log shows export jobs queued but canceled seconds later, enough to confirm someone with administrative reach interrupted replication midstream. Treasury Cyber Unit attempted rebuilds using audit log analytics, uncovering that 312 tables had been wiped in order of sensitivity. First shell companies, then politically exposed persons, then transaction corridors. For context abroad, think of FinCEN's entire ownership database blanking hours before publication of sanctions lists. Overnight, South Africa lost the ability to trace where procurement money actually landed. Officials issued statements promising reconstruction within the quarter. 2 years later, the placeholder site still reads, "Under review." The cost is not technical, it is moral. When a nation's map of corruption vanishes, its investigators navigate by rumor. From Pretoria to Cape Town, the story repeats. Every missing docket, every erased checksum, every paper that burned was not only a record, but a restraint. When archives fail, power edits itself. The machinery of accountability does not collapse in explosions. It fades line by line inside fluorescent rooms where someone clicks delete. Before this story fades the same way, smash the like button, comment your take, and subscribe. Because silence is how corruption becomes permanent. Next, we trace the cross-border pipelines that turn South Africa's disappearing records into continental profit corridors. See you tomorrow.